Happy New Year! With just a few weeks until free agency kicks off in the WNBA, all of the head coaching vacancies have been filled. And I have Meghan Hall of For the Win here to give teams grades on their hires, along with a discussion about how diversity in coaching and front offices has evolved in the WNBA. The Locked On Women's Basketball Podcast, it starts right now.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome. You are Locked On to Women's Basketball. I am Jackie Powell, and happy Friday, the first Friday of 2025. I'm one of your hosts on this show. I cover the New York Liberty at the Next, and I've covered women's basketball and its culture nationally at many other places. We want to thank you for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. And remember that we are brought to you by everyone at the Next, a place where we cover women's basketball all the time. And we tell the stories that need to be told every day. Remember that Locked On Women's Basketball is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and many more. Also, your favorite podcast now has a newsletter, introducing the Locked On NBA Daily Newsletter. Your one-stop shop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at lockedondaily.com. That's lockedondaily.com, and start your day with all the new free news on the Locked On NBA newsletter. Today's show is brought to you also by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season with FanDuel, because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right. Last time we were together, dear listener, I had Alex Simon of SF Gate on here to discuss our bold predictions for the year of women's basketball in 2025. We made bold predictions about free agency, the NCAA tournament, the WNBA draft, and even the W's upcoming CBA negotiations. Go check that one out. But today, Meghan and I are going to dive into all of the new head coaching hires, and I believe that number is 7. So in segment 1, we're going to tackle the first few hires that we saw roll out during the fall. So that's the Fever, the Sky, and the Dream. In segment 2, we'll get into the hires that happened in December and the LA Sparks, who announced their new head coach. I believe it was on November 19th. And then in the final segment, we're going to get into some chatter that we've seen online about who got these positions. We'll take a look at the numbers and some of the nuance that goes along with franchises hiring diverse candidates or franchises not hiring diverse candidates. So really looking forward to this discussion with Meghan. So Meghan, since you are based in Atlanta, I think it's apropos that we start with the Atlanta Dream, who they were the third team to announce their hire after Indiana and Chicago. So what grade did you give to the Dream and Karl Smesko?
Yeah, so I gave the Dream a B+ on this. I think that Karl's a very unique sort of situation, right? You managed to pull this guy away from basketball, after 20 plus seasons. Like, what would make this guy come, out of the college ranks and into the WNBA? So in my mind, I think it was one of the culture fit, right? I think that Karl had to buy into what Atlanta is building and what their goal is. the general manager, Dan Padover, realized, like, hey, one is development for that team, right? You got a generational superstar in Ryan Howard, and you have multiple pieces to build around her. And you want to make sure that everyone else on the team is also developing and growing too. So I think that was really important to them. But two, Karl's, I would almost say his offensive identity is living at the 3-point line. And Atlanta had some really great, fantastic 3-point shooters, but they weren't very consistent in their 3-point shooting throughout the season and even the last couple of seasons. So I think that's something that's a huge draw. And then finally, for me, what gave it why this hire wasn't an A, mainly because I'm curious about how Karl develops them defensively. So for Atlanta, they were a defensive that really, I mean, they're going to pick pockets any chance that they get. But they weren't consistent. That word consistency is really probably what you're going to hear a lot out of Atlanta. And that's what drives fans, almost, nuts, for lack of a better phrase. It drives them crazy because this team is super talented, but they weren't able to put it together consistently throughout the season. So I think for Karl, his task, if you will, is to get this team to perform at a high level and be in the top, I would say, half of the league for much of the season.
Yeah, I mean, those are excellent questions and concerns. I give Karl an A-, which I guess I think you could argue, like when we would get report cards in school, like A- and B+ were really close
right
to
there.
each
Yeah.
other. Like it's sort of like right in that same range. So I think we probably agree on a lot here. But for me, reason I gave the Dream and Karl an A- is because, I mean, you alluded to this before, but in 2024, the Dream, I believe, were 9th in the league in 3-point attempts with 19.4. Karl's FGCU teams, they shot around 29 threes per game in the last college season, the 2023-2024 college season. It is very clear to me that Dan Padover wants the Atlanta Dream playing a modern style. And Karl has been running a modern style with teams that didn't have some of the best talent in the world. So to me, it made a lot of sense for what the Dream need. My questions are, Karl hasn't coached in the WNBA before. There's a lot that is different. Shot clocks are different. The talent is going to be different that he is scouting against. So, anytime you have someone doing something for the first time, there are concerns. Okay, so moving on, let's tackle Chicago and Indiana together. So tell me, Indiana and Chicago, what are your grades?
So I gave Stephanie White's hire an A+. I felt like that was the best possible situation for the Fever, bar none. For Chicago, I actually gave them an A. I thought this was very close to being a home run hire for Chicago. And I'll say this, looking at Stephanie White, I mean, the Indiana ties just leap off the page. Like, she's coming back home. She was drafted by this franchise. She's been there before. She's coming back again. You now have the ability to coach Caitlin Clark, which she has spoken about glowingly for, multiple occasions. You got a really young squad that clearly figured it out as they were going along. Now they've eked out 20 wins. Like they're clearly going somewhere. And Stephanie White can do that for them. She can continue to push them forward. There's a reason why Connecticut was obviously, semifinals, but top 3, if not better, defense for most of the season and a powerful offense. Obviously, it's not the same players, but if you can combine those sorts of things and really get them to buy into what you're selling, I'm not even worried about Indiana. Like, they will be a force to be reckoned with for some time. For Chicago, like I said, as close to a home run hire as you could probably get. We could probably call it a home run hire for them. You get someone from Becky Hammond's coaching tree, which obviously winning culture, but you also get a player development coach. And for me, that's really important. You got 2 young pieces in Angel Reese and Camila Cardoso, who you need to figure out how to get both of them on the court working at the same time. If Kennedy Carter comes back, a young talent with one of the fastest steps I've ever seen in the entire WNBA, who can score lightning quick. I mean, there are some pieces to build there. So I think for the Sky, they had to have someone who could focus on the player development aspects. And you nailed it out of the park with one of the top candidates from the coaching pool. And so, yeah, for the Sky, considering the tumultuous seasons they've had prior to, before now with leadership changes and players and that sort of thing, this is a really good thing for them. I'm super excited to see what they build with Tyler Marsh.
So I gave everyone in this first segment an A-. So Stephanie White an A-, Tyler Marsh an A-. I mean, in this first segment, I thought the hires were they were pretty good hires generally. Reason I give them both an A- is for Stephanie White, a lot of her success has not come from coaching younger rosters. For Tyler, I think my concern is just how he shifts from being an assistant to a head coach. Is he going to be the good cop, the bad cop? How will that work when he was known in Las Vegas as the coach that all the players loved and adored? And I'm not saying that's not going to be what happens in Chicago, but who is going to be holding people accountable? Is it going to be him? Is it going to be one of his assistants? So that's what I think about. Now, coming up, we're going to get into the other hires. We're going to give our grades. But first, I do want to talk to you all about our good friends at Game Time. So I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. One of my favorite memories was attending a concert last year. It was actually Simple Plan and Avril Lavigne. It was awesome. Now Game Time has made it easier to get tickets for events like these with its new feature, Game Time Picks. This feature filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. So, Avril Lavigne and Simple Plan are going on tour again in 2025. So, I was looking once again on the Game Time app. With Game Time Picks, I found some pretty amazing deals, and I can see the view from my seat before buying. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Well, thank you very much, Game Time. And as you all can hear, I am very much so into my pop punk and angst, talking about Avril Lavigne and Simple Plan. Love that stuff growing up, and I still love it today. But anyway, I am back here with Meghan Hall of For the Win. We are back to talking about our grades for some coaching hires. We are now going to tackle the Sun, the Sparks, the Wings, and the Mystics. And, the Sparks, they were the first to tell us who they hired in November, and the rest all came within 3 weeks of each other in December. So
just a mad dash, that's all.
It was a mad dash. Maybe should we tackle LA first because they were before the mad dash?
Yeah.
Let's start with LA. All right, Meghan.
All right. So for LA, I actually gave them a C+, which now hear me out. This is nothing against Lynne Roberts at all. But what I'm mostly concerned about is LA having someone who feeds into their winning culture. Now, one of the main reasons why LA probably was like, all right, we got to go ahead and get our head coach is because they want to hit the ground running. They've got a really young core. They want success immediately, right? Kurt Miller didn't get very long in LA before they were like, all right, you got to go. We need someone else. This isn't where we want to go. So my question to you is when you pull someone from the college ranks and bring them into the WNBA is, what's the leash? How long are they going to have, or are you going to allow the space for like, hey, for growth, for, potentially figuring it out? Now, Lynne Roberts obviously comes from a winning culture. She's got 3 NCAA tournament berths. She was 2023 Pac-12 Coach of the Year. So clearly she knows how to win, but I'm curious about growth and what's the leash there?
I was a bit kinder. I gave them a B plus because I think LA also was a team that struggled to play a modern system when they have all of these young pieces that could be plugged into a modern style. Cameron Brink, Rickea Jackson. So, those 2 in particular are young stars that have modern skill sets. So, Lynn plays a modern style, but I think for me, and I think you started to hit on this too, they're so young. They need someone with a bit of a developmental background, and don't really know if that is what Lynne Roberts can do. I happen to know that LA was really gunning for Tyler Marsh. They were in the running for him, and he decided to go to Chicago instead. So that's why I do have questions. Do I think Lynn is a good coach? Yes. Do I think the Sparks are going to start to play a little bit more of a modern style? Yes. But I do have concerns, which you brought up about the leash. She could do a good job for a rebuilding team, and they could still be like, oh, nope, we're moving on. Let's tackle the mad dash, shall we?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so Connecticut Sun.
All right. So for the Sun, I was actually genuinely surprised that they went to the international ranks to go grab their coach. Not like in a bad way, but just generally surprised. I would say that probably feeds into the general consensus that I heard from other teams of like, hey, we are turning over every possible leaf to go find someone. So, and forgive me, I hope I'm pronouncing this right. Rashid Mezian, I believe is how you pronounce his last name. But finding Rashid is really, honestly, it's great in my mind. International basketball is much different than, and obviously domestic basketball, American basketball. It's much more physical, that sort of thing. Those players are usually when you have a player that comes from those sorts of systems, they play fast, they play quick. Defense is a priority. Connecticut Sun clearly have said defense is a priority to them. They want to keep, potentially being there. So for Rashid, I gave this a B plus. I didn't think it was a terrible hire whatsoever. We just saw this guy coach during the Olympics. So, it's not like he can't coach at some of the highest stages there. So I don't have any sort of qualms about it. Do you want me to go through the others, or you want to wait and go through wings and misses?
I'll just give a quick note on
Sure.
Connecticut. I gave them a C on this, which was a bit lower. The
Okay.
reason was Connecticut is in I would say, a precarious position because they announced a new GM in Morgan Tuck. She did not allude to the Sun going in more of a rebuilding direction, although the writing has been on the wall for years. How does Rashid keep that core together in Dewana Bonner, Bree Jones, and Alyssa Thomas when he doesn't know them? Also, I will never forget how his decision-making in the Olympics caused the Belgian national team to lose out on the bronze medal. I mean, Sandy Brondello outcoached him. Moving on to, shall we go to Dallas now?
Yeah, let's talk about Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
I gave this a C minus. All right, Dallas. I'm trying to follow where we're going here, but I'm getting a little lost. All right. I understand that you went out and picked out Chris. And you're like, hey, this guy's been at USC for 2 seasons now, player development, he's got Juju Watkins, he's been, there. He's got some background from 8 seasons, mind you, 8. of working with a certain someone, and that certain someone is Curt Miller, who is now the new general manager. And in my mind, I said, all right, was this the best candidate for Dallas?
Sure. I give it a B minus just because when it comes to trying to fit what Dallas needs, and Dallas, they need someone Curt Miller can trust. That's the only way this is going to work.
Okay.
And that is Chris Koklanis. I mean, Curt has said openly that he views Chris as like a third son. So there is a lot of trust there. I happen to know that Curt Miller and the Dallas Wings were very interested in trying to bring Nikki Collin back home to the WNBA. That would have made a lot of sense to me. There was a lot of trust between Nikki Collin and Curt Miller. So last but not least, the Washington Mystics.
Oh, Mystics. I'm so sorry to any Mystics fans that may be watching this, because this is probably just as painful for you as it is for me, but I gave them a D+. I am not a fan of this hire whatsoever. Where I puzzle here is that, like, your candidate that you've brought to, Sydney Johnson, now has, granted, he just coached 3-on-3 basketball, right? FIBA America, they come home with a silver medal. Like, okay, great. So you got some ties with Brittany Sykes right away. That's fantastic. It's great. Where I pause is that Sydney has not had a head coaching job in eons. And the last time that he was a head coach was for the Fairfield men's basketball team in college, which he got, I'm so sorry, fired from. And so now you want him to come coach your team. This is where I pause with the Mystics, because I'm like, where are we going? Somebody explain it to me like I'm 5. I need to see the vision. And right now the vision is really cloudy. And for a franchise that potentially might miss out on a number 1 pick, or at least Paige Becker's magically falling to them, I need to understand where we're going. So to me, it seems very much like, was this the best that you could do? Was this like your number 1 pick? Like, help walk me through it, Mystics, because I don't know. And this is not a slight to Sydney at all. It's really not. It's just a matter of like, all right, Mystics, I need to understand where we're going. Show me the vision, because your fans are probably wondering the exact same thing of, where are you going? What are we doing? How are we developing players? You got some young pieces. Is EDD even coming back? Like, there's so many questions for the Mystics, and I'm not sure this hire addresses them or answers those questions right now.
I couldn't agree more. I gave this my worst grade, which was a C-, which, I don't know, maybe I should have given it a D+. I mean,
see, we're right there. We're close.
Yeah, we are close. I did hear that Breon January, and I believe, who else? Lindsay Harding, who's an assistant in LA, the Lakers on the NBA side. They were also in the running. I mean, 2 former players could have been really interesting, just because it seems like there might be a little bit more runway with the Mystics, because they clearly want to rebuild, or they understand that that's the direction they have to go in. And they have a lot of assets to be able to do so. And, you know, Mike Thibault set them up pretty well. Anyway, coming up in our final segment, we will discuss the topic of diversity in coaching and front offices, which is a topic of discussion lately. But first, I do want to talk about our good friends at FanDuel. So, the NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. I love betting on which players will score a touchdown and how many points each team will score. It's thrilling. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thank you, FanDuel. And we are back. I'm here with Meghan Hall. And now that we have done our coaching report card, it is time for us to move into talking a little bit about diversity in coaching and in front offices. And I think I've seen some tweets out there that have sort of said, well, wait a minute, you know, more men are coming into the W. What does this mean? Why is this happening? But I wanted to give us the space to sort of talk about this, talk about what we're seeing when it comes to the numbers. I did crunch some numbers to take a look at over time how this has evolved.
Yeah, let's do it. All right. So I think it's very easy to have a knee-jerk reaction about the hiring, right? There's clearly been a shift, a very quick shift to the state where we are right now. Right now, what we're seeing in the WNBA is we've gone from 3, male head coaches to now 6.
Mm-hmm.
So there's quite a doubling there, right? And the shift from the current candidate pool, which saw, coaches like Latricia Trammell, Tanisha Wright, you saw Teresa Weatherspoon, those coaches are no longer in the league, or they're currently out of the league. Let me say that. So to me, my brain starts going and says, well, why is this happening? What are we saying? What is the league saying right now? And the reason why I think that you're seeing this shift is a couple things. One, you're casting your candidate pool a lot wider, right? You heard Golden State say, hey, we had a 5-month search for our head coach. We went to the international ranks, we went to the college ranks, like we turned over everything to find the correct coach. Now, ultimately, Golden State landed with Natalie Nakase, that basically an in-house, so to speak, candidate, and hey, this is who we went with. But what that says to me is if Golden State's doing it, it can't be that they're the only ones, right? You had several teams who like had underwhelming seasons. They probably are doing the same thing. Atlanta was one of those teams. Hey, we're going to go and look at, all the possibilities. Dan Padover mentioned it. Hey, we are, before they hired Karl Smesko, we are going to go and look at all the possibilities. So to me, that says it probably ups the chance that you're going to get a male coach, right? But I didn't think you'd go from 3 to 6. So to me, whether the league intends to or not, it's telling this current group of candidates and folks that potentially want to be coaches, you are no longer good enough right now in where we are trying to go as a league. We are growing, and not only are we growing, we want things way faster. I think what you're saying is that, okay, well, you're not great enough, but maybe these people are. And whether that's the intention or not, that's the message that people are receiving when they go and look at this coaching, these head coaches. So I think that's something that the league is going to have to grapple with, because now not only are you going to have questions about the men that are here, you're going to have questions about, well, how long is their leash for grace, right? If women were getting, essentially booted in 2-3 seasons at max, is it the same thing for them? Do they have a longer leash? These are all these questions that fans are going to be wondering about. And really not just fans, but people who potentially want to be in these positions. But I think it also leaves out the portion that we're not saying out loud is like, okay, well, if these women weren't good enough, like, why weren't they? What was your criteria that said that these women weren't specifically good enough, especially for a league that is socially conscious and aware and tries its best to promote within, especially women that have been in the trenches, building within this league, coaching, playing in this league, and now want, potentially front office positions and head coaching jobs.
So those are all excellent points. And I think it's worth remembering where we came from and what this all looked like in 2020, if you could believe it. So 5 years ago. So there were, and Erica Ayala wrote a great story on this, which I will attach in the show notes. There were 8 male head coaches in the 12-team WNBA in 2020. There were 4 women. So that is such a stark difference from where we are now. So going into the 2025 season, 7 out of 13 head coaches will be women. That is still, I believe, the majority. But I think we have to remember that. We have to remember that in 2020, it was a lot less diverse. But I think we also have to remember and question whether or not all of the women who had these jobs were set up to succeed. And so was it really the smart hire when they were hired? When Dan Padover hired Tanisha Wright, his main concern was the culture. And she did deliver on that, but he didn't know that her basketball scheming needed to grow. It was hard to know that. So you just wonder, could there have been more resources in place? You wonder in Dallas, Latricia Trammell did not design that roster. She did not. You also think about someone like Noelle Quinn, who does have her job, but she went from coaching Sue Bird and Brianna Stewart along with Jewel Lloyd to there not being a Sue Bird, there not being a Brianna Stewart. And, we've seen what has happened as a result. Was she really set up for success? You mentioned Golden State, which I thought was an excellent example, and we did not include them in our report cards because that was all decided before around the WNBA playoffs were still going on. Golden State elevated 2 women of color in Ohema Nianen as the GM and Natalie Nakase as the head coach who are going to be set up to succeed. And they come from places that gave them the resources to be able to come to a new franchise to succeed. So when we talk about this, I just think about, okay, are the people who were hired, are they set up for success? Is Morgan Tuck set up for success as the new general manager in Connecticut? I really don't know. I really do not know. I want to thank you all for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen today. Your favorite podcast now has a newsletter that is the Locked On NBA Daily newsletter. Sign up for free now at lockedondaily.com. I want to give a huge thank you to Meghan Hall. Meghan, any final thoughts? Where can people find your work?
Yeah, for sure. So this is Meghan Hall, the one and only. Now you know. But it is ftw.usatoday.com. That is where you can find all of my work and our entire team of talented journalists. You can also find me on just about any social media, major website. It's Meghan with an H because I'm a little fancy. L Hall. It's Meghan L Hall on all your major social media networks.
Well, this has been Jackie Powell and
it's Meghan Hall.
And we are signing off. Happy New Year to all.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.